Hi, this is Seamless, and today I'm going to show you some cool tricks in Harmor that make neat bass sounds. Primarily, how to use the Prism knob to do more interesting things than what it just does by default, and also how to use Unison mapping, which is cool stuff. Unison mapping also applies to Citrus, and I'll show you how when I'm done covering it here, but let's get started. So I have here a Harmor, also made a little pattern. And it's just, a pattern. It's cool. So this is default, right? Yeah. So I'm gonna start with Prism. So when you normally do that, you hear that kind of weird organy sort of sound. And if I just make a constant tone, if you watch what happens in the little feedback window here. That's what Prism does. It moves the frequencies based on how the Prism mapping works. Now, the default Prism mapping, if you go into the envelope window and choose Harmonic Prism, this shows the default mapping for Harmonic Prism, and that's what this thing is. So you see how it's evenly distributed up and down like that, and then you can see how the frequencies move up and down like that. So that's how it works by default. Now, in terms of bass sounds, you can kind of hear the beginning of a neat effect, like that kind of squelchy sort of pseudo FM effect that you get with the Prism, but also a whole bunch of undesirable kind of split sounds that just turn to kind of fuzz after a while, and so you want to get rid of that. Well, let's make a new mapping for Harmor, for the Harmonic Prism. Because what I wanted to do is when it modulates the frequency, it's not actually frequency modulation, but it is modulating frequencies, which is kind of weird. But when I want to do that, I don't want it to do that to the lower frequencies, because that affects the basic note of the whole tone, and it makes everything sound bad, at least for most purposes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw like any other line editor in FL. You can do this and that and this and that. This is a very basic shape. You can experiment and find newer and cooler things, but this is something that I tend to use often. And so now we have that kind of squelch going on in there, which is neat. Now, a cool thing that I like to do, and I've done this with some of the basses that I made recently in tracks such as Force Multiplier, is applying distortion over having that kind of effect on it, and then also doing the kind of Reese pitch stacking that you do, where you have two or more of the same tone but with pitch differences, and that creates that kind of warble. Normally you could do that. Well, if you try to do that with Unison, it doesn't quite work. And the reason why that doesn't work is because the pitch difference is not a ratio. It's the same throughout every note. So you don't get that. You do get that pitch warble, but it's the same speed for every note. And traditionally, you want it to increase in speed as you go higher in pitch. So there's two ways to do this. The first way that I had just been doing is you go into part B, you copy everything in the part B by having this drop down. You can copy and paste parts, and then you just use this pitch modifier over here, which is a ratio. It's the frequency ratio, and that way you'll get the warble that changes speed over pitch changes. But for the purposes of understanding what unison mapping is, I'm going to show you how to do that without doing that, and just keeping it in one part. All right. So I now have unison engaged for just two voices, but I have pitch and phase at 0. The reason I did that is because I'm now going to go back into the envelope window, and I'm going to go pick up pitch. Here's pitch, and then over here you have all the articulators, the various ways that you can automate the parameter. One of them is unison index mapping. Now what happens here is we have set two voices. So we have one of the voices over here and one of the voices over here. So now the pitch is actually changing for one of the voices over there. I'm actually gonna bring it down to like 50 cents. A little bit less, not that far. Zoom. Yeah. So. And if you do want a more pronounced warble, you do want to have a higher pitch difference. And so that's a cool thing. So now watch what happens when I increase the voice amount. You see, now we have more poles. So each pole is a voice. Because when I first looked at the Unison mapping, I thought that each column was a voice, like the internal column was a voice, and like I realized logically that doesn't make any sense. But you see that I have set to 5 voices, and there are 5 poles. So each point is a new parameter set for each individual voice. So you can do extremely detailed and intricate things with Unison mapping on everything that has that as an articulator option. Get rid of these. Because just for this, the 2 voices is enough. So then distortion, let's do that, because honestly, the effects are awesome. You're gonna see me moving around the phase parameter here. One of the cool things about using the Unison mapping to do the pitch difference manually like that is that you can then take advantage of the phase parameter, which creates extremely interesting effects. Like in most of this only becomes apparent when you use distortion, because it for reasons, honestly, it gets louder, crunchier, and the differences become way more apparent. Different types of distortion do different things. I noticed that hill and flat hat kind of added a sub, which I would not recommend doing when you're this low on a triangle wave. However, if you go over to a square wave, adding in that kind of extra sub in there based on the algorithm of that particular distortion type, I think helps in terms of the square wave, because the square wave, despite being a similar period length, because of the way it's shaped, sounds like it's a higher note than it is. Anywho, that's a pretty neat sound all on its own. I'm not going to go into like resampling steps or something, but if you were to resample something, this would be a really cool sound, and you can get neat results from it. But knowing how to use the Unison mapping, I think, is extremely powerful, and I'm going to show you how that works in Citrus. Audio skipping. I wish I didn't do that. All right, so again, now the way that Citrus works is that there's tabs for everything. So if I go to any of the operators and like I go to volume, and then the first row of tabs are the parameters and the second row of tab are the articulators. So for volume, there's envelope articulator, LFO, key, velocity, mod X and Y, random, and then the unison. So the same thing here, you go to the front page and you have your unison setting, and then you go back into the unison mapping, and then you have your poles for the unison for that parameter. So that means that in this particular example, the volume will be different for voice 2 and 3 out of 4. Yeah, 2 and 3 out of 4 of the units of voices that are there. And so you can make a much more detailed sound with certain things. Like for example, if you wanted to make an FM effect, like a basic FM patch, you know how when I was doing it earlier, just make it really quick. what I'm going to do is I'm basically going to make two FM tones out of one patch. And I'm going to do that using only one FM set. That is, I'm not going to have two outputs going on. I'm just going to have the one output, the one FM with the pretty standard setup. Triangle for the bass modulator pitch, triangle for the higher harmonic, and then sine for the harmonic modulator. I'm going to link the mod amount of operator 1 to modifier X so that this automation will do something. So the two primary sounds that we get out of here is this basic sound here, and then the one with the secondary modulation. So I could engage, say, two voices, and then turn down all of the primary unison settings, and go into operator 4, or I can either modulate the volume of operator 4, or I can modulate the mod input of operator 3. And so in this case, I'll use the mod input of operator 3 in the unison mapping. So one is the bass sound, and the other is the modulated sound. Now you're hearing both at once. So if you want, this could be an interesting layering tool to make more intricate sounds, and still only having one patch and only one set. So you're saving your operators if you want to do different things on top of that, and you can use the unison mapping to control how much of what is doing what where, and up to 9 for Citrus and also 9 for Harmor. So yeah, that was pretty quick. Pretty soon I actually am going to start trying to do a stream. I haven't quite figured out what I'm going to do. I'm thinking I might do some of the how to bass live, or a whole separate show. I guess I'm calling it a show. I've only really just determined that I can in fact stream. I don't really have an idea of what I want to do. Lots of people have suggested that I just make songs and do streams live, and I guess I could do that, but that doesn't seem very effective. I mean, I suppose while I'm trying to find something to do, I can just do that, and if people like it, then that's great. People like it. I guess you can ask me questions, and I can do things while you're looking, and then be more interactive, and people can learn things better than they could perhaps by watching these videos. Anyway, so yes, I hope you have learned something about the Prism and Harmor and how unison mapping works, and happy bassing. Happy bassing. That's awful. Damn. Yeah. Well, thanks for watching. Have a nice day.